Hi all, Pastor Nicole Martin here. It is lovely to be with you this evening. I know some of you will know who I am and other people will not, and that's okay. I'm getting the privilege of meeting you for the first time, and it is my pleasure. As a pastor for the last several days, I've seen a lot of things going on in Williston and in North Dakota and around the United States and across the globe, and it brings me ache in my heart, as I'm sure it brings many of you an ache in your heart, and we're struggling with how to give words to this thing. And tonight I was out watering the garden and thinking about how do we name our role in a place where we want to speak. How do we name what it is we're trying to do? Especially when so many of our peer groups are outside trying to be that voice, and that voice is being hijacked by other voices, by other propaganda, by other ideologies and thought processes. Specifically, if you don't know, I'm talking about the fact of people standing up to protest and then that protest being hijacked. What does it mean when someone's voice gets robbed, and what is our role inside of that? Because we are called as people to have a voice with our neighbor who is in harm's way, and have a voice with our neighbor who is being treated unfairly and unjustly. You know, as Christian people, we say, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. And so I've been wrestling with all of that. And I kept thinking about, what does it mean to protest? And I think protest, you know, there's the word protest, you know, like we're going to go out and advocate, we're going to test the system in this way with our voice. But I keep thinking about people in our history who have protested in some very unique ways in order to get their story told. I think about Rosa Parks. She didn't have to say a lot. She just didn't move her seat. She protested by her location. I think about Gandhi. He protested by refusing to eat. I think about Mother Teresa. She protested the system of injustice, that hierarchy that created untouchables at the bottom. She protested by serving those untouchables. I think about Martin Luther, in the year 1500-ish. He protested when his intellect saw a conflict between what was and what should be, and he hung some words up on a door that sparked a great controversy we know as the Reformation. I think about Saint Lucia. Now, if you don't know who Saint Lucia is, she was a girl who many centuries ago would take food to people who were being persecuted in the catacombs, and the catacombs were really dark, so she wore a crown of candles on her head. So she had two hands to take food, and the candles on her head lit the pathway through the darkness to take people food. She protested what was happening to people by serving people. And then I think about Jesus. Jesus protested the system of oppression when he touched people who shouldn't be touched, the lepers. Jesus protested when he fed people who were hungry, when he multiplied the bread and the fish. Jesus, and when he did it on Sabbath, it was a bigger protest than normal, right? He protested the discombobulation and brokenness of the world when he hung on a cross. Protesting. We have legacies of it in our world. in our history as people of ways in which we can stand up and have voice, even without speaking. Ways in which we can compassionately speak out for what is wrong and what is broken without violence, but with strength. And in this time frame, when we are watching unique moments in world history where people are standing up with that voice and it is being robbed, I think maybe we need to find alternative ways to protest. And we can do that by looking at our ancestors. And we can remember that one of the great gifts of a protest is the concept that a protest is meant to teach. It's meant to raise awareness. It's meant to share a story, right? So how can we, in our own time and place, offer the participation of sharing the story to fight, to point out, to raise awareness to what is broken, but then try to advance what is good? The act of protesting as we know it in our life, where we gather in a unique space to share this loud, unified voice, have you ever noticed that happens for a moment? And when you blow out your candle or you put down your sign, that moment has passed. And you go to work the next day. And that moment stayed there. But what if we could find ways of speaking out about injustice and speaking out about cruelty and speaking out about harm against our neighbors in ways that didn't get left in the past? That's what I've been wrestling with. It is incredibly easy to pick up and go stand in front of a police station or go stand in front of a park and light a candle and cry together. That is easy. But what I'm asking you, is it enduring? Is the message that you're trying to speak in those moments an enduring message? Kind of like the same concept. Have you ever heard, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach him how to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime? We can protest for a day. We can stand up for what is brokenness for a day. But what do we do to turn it into a lifetime of helping our neighbor? Do we do something more like Mother Teresa, where we serve them? Where we embrace our arms with those which we seek to help and journey with them? Or do we still just kind of put them over there and say, oh, and make ourselves feel good by saying we shouted for them? Where do you sit in that? For me, in wrestling with this idea, I thought, for my enduring legacy of trying to create space where the idea of always being aware of injustice and always being aware of brokenness and creating space for the stories to be told beyond a moment, I'm going to turn to ribbon. I invite you to simply take ribbon of any color you want. Maybe it's a purple ribbon, so you have hope that all people know righteousness and know dignity. Maybe you want to take a blue ribbon because your heart is just breaking, or you want to remember and have hope that all people have peace. Maybe a yellow ribbon because you want and have hope that all people will have joy. Or maybe it's a red ribbon to remember bloodshed. Or a ribbon to represent a person that has been harmed. For me, I am choosing the red ribbon for MMIW, Murdered Missing Indigenous Women, because they are part of that broken system, right? They are people who get forgotten about, and they have stories, and they have lives, and they have children, and their legacy gets lost because of harm and injustice perpetrated against them by people who see them as less than. And I have a black ribbon here because I know in my lifetime, many of my African American friends or any person of color, I have been witness to when they get treated differently, when police officers pull them over simply because they look like a report, right? I have been witness to times when their voice doesn't matter and they need a white person to speak up for them. And I put a pink ribbon because I also recognize that there are people, beautiful, lovely people, who identify as something other than heterosexual, and they too know what it means to be oppressed, to have to worry about their safety, to have to worry about peace, to have to worry about whether their home that they're in is an acceptable place for them to live, because maybe their landlord will not agree with their lifestyle. So I choose these three colors to represent groups of people that I have great passion about and who I know have suffered. And I choose to wear these ribbons as part of my identity in the world, so that when it's my protest of the harm that has happened to them, but then this is what it does. It creates a space for people to talk. Hey, Pastor Martin, why do you wear those ribbons? What's up with that thing? And then it gives space for us to share stories of people we know and people we love and the harm that's been perpetrated to them and against them. So on this day, well, I know many of us are wrestling with, should we gather to protest? Should we gather to grieve? And yes, you have every right to stand up and use your voice that way. And I will be participating in a grieving ceremony later this week. What I am saying to you is, don't be fooled if you think that this one moment of protest is enough. That getting riled up and emotional in that one moment is going to fix all of it. And I challenge you to think about ways you can create space that serve your neighbor, that allow you to walk alongside of them with generosity and kindness and compassion. Again, I point you back to Mother Teresa and St. Lucia and Jesus, to Rosa Parks and Gandhi, whose concept of protest took amazing, beautiful, creative energy, and none of it was violent. No, Martin Luther King, nonviolent voice that carried weighted words. He moved mountains, but his voice was heard. And we can't hear the voice of the heartache of our brothers and sisters when we don't allow it to speak and we dominate it with violence. So I invite you, if you want, take a ribbon, make your own pen, create a space for yourself to invite conversation so that we can continue to perpetuate what is right and what is good. I'm sure many people will have comments about what I have just said. And you can say whatever. I just speak from my place of being a person who is in love with the gospel and a person who is in love with this God and this Son of God called Jesus and his idea of protest. And protesting by serving is an amazing thing to do. It carries weight. Blessings to you on this day. Ciao.